Hi, first and foremost, I just want to say hi. We are 2 seconds in the video and nothing has been accomplished yet, but as I am watching back this footage, I can only really say that I'm just embarrassed because I am a streamer. I stream on Twitch, more so than I ever make YouTube content, so a lot of my time is always spent looking at my monitor or looking at chat, which is just something that I'm used to. So there is a lot of time spent in this video looking at the monitor, and it doesn't look the best. And now looking back at this footage, I acknowledge that. But this isn't something that I want to re-record, so I can attempt to fix that in the next one. So please forgive me if you notice that. Okay, bye. I just want to say happy Pride before it's too late. I hope all the girls, gays, and theys have spent this month flourishing and continue to do so long after this month is over. In celebration of this month, I am posting this video to start off my trans series. As a trans woman, I've had lots of ups and downs related to my transition, as I'm sure you can imagine. I'm choosing to share these experiences as a way of being visible to other people like me who need to hear someone empathize with their plight. This is also an attempt to educate anyone who may be ignorant to trans people and interested in learning more. As I am a part of the FGC, I feel like there are a lot of people who don't really know how to navigate it all or even begin to understand it. So I hope me sharing these things and speaking so openly about my experiences can do anything really in order to help with that, because it's necessary. We have to be honest with ourselves in saying that transitioning is almost never smooth sailing. Choosing to come out and live your truth is just step one of many, and it's one of the scariest and riskiest steps of all. There's so many things that go through your mind in the moment that you fear. What if this person stops talking to me? What if this person doesn't like me anymore? What if I cause a split here? What if me being me causes a problem? Is the main source of this, which is awful and it's a terrible thought to think, but unfortunately being prepared for the absolute worst is kind of always a necessity. People may lose housing, they may lose a job, friends, family, or really anything, including their life. Loss during this process is scarily common and a tragic truth for many trans people, myself being one of them. This is the story of how transitioning caused me to lose one of the best friends I had in this world, my older and only brother. Now, for a bit of background, my brother and I were very close throughout our childhood. We didn't necessarily have an easy one, so our bond was all we had to sustain us a lot of the time. We were quite literally locked in our house together all the time since we were never really allowed to go anywhere or do much at all. This left a lot of time for us to butt heads, as any siblings do, but it also resulted in endless days and nights of playing video games together, singing our favorite music together, sharing endless laughter and countless deep and difficult conversations you could only really share with a sibling. He was incredibly funny, talented, and smart in a lot of ways. I interpreted a lot of things he said to me as being very profound. For all intents and purposes, he was my cool, wise older brother. I looked up to him and trusted his word more than anyone else's. There were a lot of times in our childhood when we had to lean on each other, and when our relationship with each other was kind of what raised us. I would say that we played very important roles in each other's lives, and so much so to the point where I couldn't, at the time, imagine living without that relationship. We didn't always agree on everything, but we loved each other regardless. As we grew older, we also grew more distant. It's kind of just the way the cookie crumbles. He had a kid young and moved out when I was about 12 or 13. The years after he left were not very kind to me as I struggled with severe mental health issues. He'd always be there whenever something went wrong, but only really to hand me a joint and invalidate my struggles, passing them off as grabs for attention or me being dramatic. It became increasingly clear to me that his heart was at a very different and much darker place than mine was, not even only towards me, but towards the entire world. I didn't really understand where this came from, and it felt like it happened very quickly. He became more and more withdrawn from my entire family as time went on. My gender identity and sexual orientation was always an issue for him for whatever reason. As kids, he told me when I first admitted to having a crush on a girl that he was relieved that I wasn't gay. He told me that in his own head, he just thanked God that I didn't like boys and that I wasn't going to grow up to be that way. He always made it a point to scrutinize the things I was interested in, the way I dressed, the length of my hair, and the way I behaved, right down to the way that I walked. At one point, he even outright asked me if I just wanted to be a girl and get it chopped off. He'd scoff at me and shrug it off if I ever brought up guys I was dating or struggles I was having with them. My true self was never enough to make him proud, only to make him angry. He even worried for the way I'd influence his son and threatened me if his son grew up to be anything like me. It was difficult to navigate, to say the least. Now, when I began to accept my truth regarding my gender and confide in people close to me, my brother was the last person that I thought of telling for very obvious reasons, but he was one of the first people to find out, unfortunately. The one person I decided to open up to while I was drunk chose to share this with my brother before I was ready for him to know. He never admitted this to me outright, and neither did the person that I confided in, but I knew my brother like the back of my hand. I could feel our interactions becoming shorter and more shallow. I could feel every bit of his conscious effort to draw a distance between us. In the back of my head, I still held out hope for the day I could confess my trans identity to him and have him accept me. Transitioning was ultimately a minuscule change to the people around me. I'd always had my own unique style and set of interests. The only thing in my head that changed now was the addition of bras, skirts, and shorts to my wardrobe, and more importantly, the way I wanted to be addressed. These were things I hoped wouldn't matter that much to my siblings, since we had been through so much together at that point that, you just kind of assume, like, there's no way that anything that I say at this point could possibly chase this person out of my life or scare them off or make them not want to interact with me anymore. Like, it's just impossible, right? So one day, my brother stopped by our childhood house unannounced while I was home alone. He had only stopped by to pick up something he needed. This was before I was fully out and well before I decided to start living as myself full time. I had just started kind of testing the waters to see how certain things made me feel in relation to my gender dysphoria. So at this time in specific, I had my nails long and I had them painted. As he said bye to me that day, I vividly remember him looking at my hands and nodding his head in disappointment. At that moment, I knew I was slowly losing my brother. I knew he didn't want to believe in the person I could become. My brother made that visit 5 years ago in 2016. I had literally no idea and no way of knowing that would be the last time I'd ever see him. As time went on and I began living as Luna full-time, word spread around our family and my brother was one of them. He didn't know where I was in the transition process and even tried to talk me out of my decision. I remember not talking to him for a few weeks and I just didn't for sure know why until I finally got this text out of the blue one day. He dead named me to start and said, "I love you. I don't care if you're gay, but I don't want you to do this. It's just not right. I care about you, so before you go through with this, please, can you come over and we can talk over a joint?" At this point, I was already well into hormone replacement therapy and started the process of changing my name. And this was something, like I said before, that he had always tried to do, offer me a joint and just minimize whatever I was going through at the time. So, although this was offensive, it wasn't really that surprising. It was at this point that I told him, "There's no turning back. I've already gone past the point of no return. There is no changing my mind. You've literally asked me if I would do this before, and it didn't seem to matter back then, and I don't know why it does now. I'll continue to keep it from my nephew as long as I can continue to be in his life, but that's as far as I'll go." I got no response. I grew more and more upset with his lack of communication with me and his attempts to keep me away from his son, my nephew. I would try to negotiate with him and tell him that I'd keep my transness completely secret from my nephew if it meant that I got to continue seeing him, but to no avail. This continued until I finally got this text. He dead named me, of course. You need to understand that I am not okay with what you are doing to yourself. My nephew grew up with his uncle, not whatever it is you're turning yourself into. He has been through enough without having to try and process whatever the hell it is you're doing. And I'll be damned if my son believes he can just throw a mask on just because he doesn't like what he sees. Maybe when he's older we can figure something out, but not now. I forbid it. That was the last text that I ever received from my brother. And you can imagine like how that feels, for someone that you grew up with and someone that, is your own blood, to leave things off on that note. But it's been years, like, it is what it is. One night, news came to me about my brother being assaulted and nearly killed. My mother had gone to see him in the hospital after having minimal communication with him since my coming out. I hoped that nearly losing his life would bring him to his senses, but I'd come to realize those expectations were silly to have. My mom would come home and tell me that my brother continued to dead name me, misgender me, and express outrage at the fact that I was being allowed to live this way first and foremost, and supported in this lifestyle. This was the same year I experienced my very first Thanksgiving and Christmas without my brother. That Christmas sticks out to me specifically as I'd spent it without my mom, my stepdad, and nephew as well, since they were all still allowed to be around my brother. Spending that night next to my drunk dad who'd fallen asleep on the couch was a morbid reality I never thought I'd have to face. My favorite holiday was supposed to be one of the happiest times, full of cheer for everybody, especially me since I loved it so much, felt tainted and empty for the first time. Honestly, I was heartbroken. It's kind of hard to not be heartbroken in a situation like that, as I'm sure you can all imagine. I blamed myself for causing a split between my family, for being the divisive one. I was angry, I was hurt, and I was feeling betrayed by my brother and the world. My best friend and my mentor in life had abandoned me. This wasn't a prank, this was real. All the family horror stories I'd heard from other trans girls were becoming my fucking reality. He eventually stopped all communication with my entire family because of me. And I just remember so many times running through everything that had happened and just asking myself, why didn't he love me enough to just try? And I still don't know the answer. I've spent a lot of time hating my brother for the things he said to me and how he made me feel. I've spent a lot of time hoping to bump into him somewhere, just to see his face again, knowing he'd probably lash out at me and even try to hurt me, knowing how aggressive and frustrated he is at the situation. Even when I'm out driving on the road, I hope to maybe come across his car and just exchange a glance, and that plant some seed in his head. I've spent a lot of time wishing for a random phone call or a text from him. Maybe he'd miss me enough to see me again and we could laugh like old times and he could see the amount of pride I carry now that I'm living my truth. Maybe I could show him how good this is for me and something could change. I finished school, I got a job, I moved out and accepted myself more than I ever had before. I went through reassignment surgery, hoping everyone I love would surround me as I regained consciousness in the hospital, and they did. But still, it was incomplete because the one person I spent the most time in my life with didn't want to be there. I was dead to him. 5 years later, now in my current life, I've given up. I've learned how foolish it is to hold out hope for somebody who's shown me the evil within them time and time again. Even using the word brother feels strange to me now, since I forget I even have one half the time. I've seen my nephew a few times since this happened, but even that came to a halt once again. I kind of have to accept that I probably will never see him and get the opportunity to explain my absence and reestablish our bond until he grows up and has the liberty to seek me out on his own. There's nothing more that crying about it will do. There's nothing more that being angry about it will do. There's no more mourning. It's just over. To someone who's unfamiliar with the plight of a transgender person in this world, my story may seem devastating, but to someone else, I should be counting my blessings. I got to keep my mom, my dad, my extended family that I grew up with, and all the few friends I had left. I wasn't kicked out of my home. I didn't have to seek medical transition in secret. I didn't have to live any type of double life. Besides the occasional feeling of missing the bond I had with my sibling, as anyone would naturally in a situation like this, all in all, I am lucky. I remember meeting other transgender women in the hospital during my reassignment surgery who were shocked at how much love and support I had, and especially shocked at my parents being at the hospital with me and not being disgusted by the existence of all the other trans women around me. My dad and my mom were very willing to ask questions to these other trans women and were very eager to learn. And this came as a surprise to these other women who just hadn't experienced that before. These were women who, in the pursuit of their own happiness, had been abandoned by their spouses and family, resulting in them losing their homes, their children, and all that they knew. Trans people all up and down the menu end up abused, homeless, unemployed, assaulted, and even dead. They would tell me that it's a strike of luck to even get to keep one person in my life. No matter how devastating this was to me, and sometimes still is, I still have to remind myself that it in no way defines me. This had everything to do with the other person involved and nothing to do with me. There was never any deceit on my end, only desperate attempts to salvage what was left. I can't feel guilty about it anymore because it doesn't change anything, and I wouldn't change anything I did. It doesn't make my brother any less of a bad person for abandoning and disrespecting me the way he did. Nothing can really soften the blow of how this all turned out. What is going to change any of this, and what is going to make any of this okay? There's no answer behind all of this. It just is what it is. It's just blatant transphobia. My intention with telling this story is to hopefully help someone else who may need to hear this. I'm not trying to make anyone fear what could happen to them for coming out. As a matter of fact, I've been honored to have been the confidant to many trans people who expressed to me their fears and anxieties around transitioning. And every time, the only thing I can really say is to put yourself first. If that means waiting until you're moved out and or guaranteed safety in your current living situation, then do it. If that means risking it all right away in order to let yourself breathe and be free, then do it. If that means pursuing your dreams solo without even asking for the support of anyone, then do it. Suppressing any part of yourself in fear of what other people may think is incredibly unhealthy and will only eat away at you and make you feel worse as time goes on. You're not living your life anymore. You're living your life for the expectations of other people. What we must do together as trans people is stand our ground and fight. The world doesn't bend for us, as it's shown us time and time again, and it never will. It can be terribly cruel, hateful, and even dangerous. Even knowing that, we still have to be the change we want to see. We have to be our own strength, our own motivators, our own inspiration. That is our means of survival. It is what makes us stronger. To anyone watching this who falls under the trans umbrella, I commend you for accepting yourself as you are. Stay strong under any and all circumstances, because while tragedy may await you on your journey, it's meaningless. It's ultimately meaningless in comparison to the fulfillment and pride you get to carry when you live in your truth 110%. Take pride in every single accomplishment, every single step of the way. It'll all be worth it in the end, I promise you. Thank you to anyone who took the time to listen to my story. Any feedback in the comments is always welcome, as well as suggestions for future videos on this channel. If you know anybody who could learn from this or relate to this, feel free to share it with them. Subscribe, of course, if you wish to see more from me, and you can also follow my Twitch channel as well as all my other social media linked in the description to keep up with me so you'll never miss out on a video or a live stream or a tweet or a picture or anything of the sort. Thank you again so much for watching, and one last time, happy Pride!